heard that we were going to do mini talks at reunion, I knew that I wanted to give one. Why? Well, I've been on an intense journey of transitions and transformation over the past 2.5 years. And it began with leaving Bain, and then convincing a well-respected startup to hire me for a role that I made up for myself. Then getting that job, realizing it wasn't really everything that I wanted it to be, but persevering all the while. During that time, I was on the road a lot, traveling for almost 40 weeks straight while a family member battled cancer, thankfully successfully, but it was difficult. During that time, I worked really hard to get a big promotion, which I got, and then at the last minute didn't get. And ultimately ended up leaving that role, deciding to get my yoga teacher certification, and then deciding to start on my dream of becoming an entrepreneur. That was year one. The next 18 months were filled with what I would call a lot of experiments. I worked with worked with 4 potential co-founders on at least 8 different business ideas. I ended up advising 2 wellness startups. I spent 1 very lonely month unsuccessfully trying to come up with the next big idea. Along the way, I also started my own consulting practice, started running corporate learning development workshops, and began writing on Medium. That brings us up to about now. So why go into that laundry list of things? 2 reasons. 1, I want you to get a feel for what have been some truly untethered times. If what I just went through sounds kind of crazy, it has been. And 2, there's a part of me that wants you to know that when I say it's been 18 months since I left my last full-time, full-paying job, that part of me wants you to know that I tried, that I haven't been sitting around, and that I've been busy. So why do I care if you think that I've been busy? That's what I want to talk about. Ego and self-identity. The stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. Born out of our upbringing, shaped by our experiences, at least for me, ultimately polished into a narrative that I feel comfortable presenting to the world. To be clear, I'm very uncomfortable right now. My ego is spazzing out. This would be a lot easier story to tell if it had come to a tidy resolution, if I had founded that company that I wanted to found. But I realized that that's not the point. What I've learned along the way has not been what I'm going to do with my career. That I'm still working out. What I have learned is how much power self-identity has had over me in my life, and how much I've let that be my ego care a little bit too much about what other people think. So with that, I want to present a few lessons, hard-learned lessons from the last couple of years. I definitely don't have all the answers, but my hope is that my experience might be helpful to someone. So lesson 1, ego is a 1,000-headed dragon. In the past, I'd associated ego with ego trips, or a big ego, an excess of confidence. But over time, I've realized that ego is a lot sneakier than that. There's a book that I love that puts it well. Ego is a 1,000-headed dragon. It's a mental entity masquerading as ourself. It is a construct fueled by factors outside ourselves to justify our own existence. Regardless of the source of the ego's expectations, the result is the same. We are slaves to externally derived influences, rather than being the master of our own internal environment. I want to take you briefly back to a point in time where my ego was in full force. It's 2 years ago, and I'm about to receive a really big promotion. I had successfully figured out that an underperforming organization was being managed out, and had interviewed and gotten that person's job. night before that person was supposed to be ushered out, and I was supposed to have my all hands with my new team, I received an unexpected call from our president. We need another week. That week became another week, and then another week, and then another week. And by the 6th week, I forced an answer that I had feared was true, which was that they weren't firing the underperformer, and they weren't promoting me. You know Dante's 7 Circles of Hell? It wasn't that dramatic, but I did go through my own levels of pain. Disappointment. The dream job, not happening. Anger. How dare they mislead me? Confusion. Had I done something wrong? Doubt. I should have known better. Embarrassment. What am I going to tell people? And ultimately, shame. Along the way, I had been quietly bragging about this upcoming promotion to family and friends, if there is such a thing as quiet bragging. And I realized that time was now over. The experience was painful, sure, but I realized my ego made it more painful. And that's the interesting thing about ego, is how it can range from smugness to shame. So imagine plotting this on a chart, consultant at heart. So on the y-axis, we have alignment with other people's values. On the x-axis, time. So over our lives, we move up and down whether we're in alignment with other people's values or not. Depends on my experience, what I'm doing, also who I surround myself with, and who I admire. When I'm in high alignment with other people's values, like I was when I was about to get that promotion, that's what I call the smugness band. When I was feeling ashamed and unsure of myself, when that promotion was suddenly taken away, and I was in low alignment with other people, that's what I call the shame band. So what I've realized is that I move up and down, and I'm going to move up and down along that y-axis over time. But entering into the smugness and the shame, that's optional. Those are emotions that are superimposed over everything that's happening around us. That's the 1,000-headed ego dragon. Which brings me to lesson 2, how to deal with the dragon. As soon as I started looking for dragons, I found quite a lot of them. Comparing myself to what other people are doing in our GSB classroom by looking on LinkedIn, dragon. Wondering, what am I going to write on my own LinkedIn bio? Dragon. Feeling FOMO, looking at people's Instagram. Dragon. Wishing that I could find just the right co-founder who's going to help me take my idea to fruition. Dragon. And for me, the biggest one, my own self-identity of wanting to be the founder or co-founder of a successful, hopefully socially meaningful consumer business. Dragon. Unfortunately, I realized that co-founder story isn't true for me. I started to walk the path, and it's something that I really wanted, and I spent 1.5 years of my life working towards it, maybe even longer. But as I started to walk that path, I realized that it didn't align really with my skills or what I wanted in my own life at this point in time. And that's been a difficult thing for me to accept. But that's what I've also learned about the 1,000-headed ego dragon, is not that the way to deal with the dragon is to aggressively wrangle each head to the ground and try and chop it off, but instead to embrace it with acceptance of what is and what isn't. Which brings me to my third and last lesson. We are not our LinkedIn bios. Letting go of my own founder narrative has been really hard. Standing, yes. Standing here right now, admitting that to everyone and also to myself is humbling. And I still don't quite know what to put on my LinkedIn bio. But what I realized after the last year and a half of stripping away identity after identity after identity is how much we are so much more than our LinkedIn bio or any other public or private identity that we make up for ourselves. We are much deeper than that, and we have the freedom and the flexibility to choose or to just remain undefined. Closing anecdote. I recently caught up with an old colleague who was weighing the decision to go to HBS or the GSB. And she told me she had visited HBS and she felt like she could fit in. And then she visited the GSB and felt like she could belong. The difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in is external. It's conforming to what's outside ourselves. That's the thousand-headed ego dragon. But belonging, that requires internal orientation. Having the awareness and the compassion and the acceptance to realize who we are and to show up authentically and embrace whatever comes of that and hopefully be welcomed for it. We have such little time together as a class this weekend. And we are so fortunate that we are a class that values belonging. So let's all make sure we show up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story. I think it's something, not necessarily feeling satisfied with what we've achieved since the GSV, I think is something that a lot of people in this room can relate to, and something that we don't necessarily all put out there. So I think you've been through a very courageous journey, and it was extremely courageous of you to share it with us, and it makes us all feel like we belong here more, so I appreciate that. And is there anything we can do to support you as you continue on this journey that has no maps?
Yeah, that is a great question. As you were saying something, a word popped to mind that I want to share with you that a friend shared with me, which is the word vulnerageous, which is courageous vulnerability. So I actually think that the way to support the most is for everyone to go be vulnerageous and follow their own path, because I have found that having other people who are walking the less certain path and going after whatever their own version of their dream or their weirdness is really inspiring. So yeah, I would say for me, feeling that also reflected back to me is what's most helpful, because it is hard to go up and down.
Totally.
A good question. Did I get another one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious if you changed your relationship with social media and technology more broadly.
Yeah, I didn't turn it off, that's for sure, but I don't know, it's a great question. I mean, I've thought so much about identity, and I still have a representation of myself online, rock climbing, a lot of rock climbing pictures. But yeah, and then people think oh, all I'm doing is rock climbing all day, every day. So I think it's just I wanted to put this conversation out there